I wanted to do a book talk today on Alan Gibney's I Carried You Home. I got this off of Book Outlet for, I think it was less than $2. For $2, can you really go wrong? Like, if it's not good or whatever, it was only $2. I feel like this is a book I read that I feel like could go either people will love it or people will hate it. And so this book, I'm gonna kind of do a little rundown at the beginning of this video, and if it interests you and you want to read it sans spoilers, I will tell you where to stop watching so that I don't spoil anything for you moving into the end of the video. But this book was so hard for me to rate, and I felt so weird about it, and it felt so weird, and it read in a really strange way. So I'm just gonna kind of talk to you guys about it, and if you have read it, definitely start a conversation down below. Let me know what you think or whatever, or if you're interested in it or what, because I'm really curious. There's only, I think, 54 reviews of this on Goodreads. So it is not a well-known book. It's not something I've ever seen anyone on here talk about, but I feel like it deserves to be talked about, if that makes sense. So in the spoiler-free part of this video, essentially this book is about a boy who's, I think, 15 when the book starts, and he has a really strained relationship with his mom because his brother has died and she's literally become like a recluse. It seems as though they have a strained relationship on top of that, but you don't find out why until later on in the book, like literally near the end. But this book was so, I didn't do try a chapter, but I read the first page of all the new books that I got, and this one just captivated me so hard. I needed to know what happened after the first page, and I think I can probably read, it's the first page, so it's not like I'm spoiling anything. The other thing I'm going to say really quickly is, it's written in a weird way, there's no quotations, it's just dashes, which makes it a little bit hard to figure out who's talking at different times, but once I got used to that, it was okay. It's kind of a long paragraph, but here we go. The police said Will landed on the hood of the car, but I imagined it differently at the time. I imagined him flying over the hood and hitting the ground and everything going quiet and still, and staying like that for a long moment. The snow falling gently on the wreck, and then the wind starting up again, and her waking with the noise, and pulling herself free and shouting into the trees, searching until she found him in the snow. She didn't think of dragging him to the car and leaving him in the seat and going for help. She wasn't capable of leaving him. She carried him on her back through the blizzard, up and down the steep hills, over the ice and snow. She kept forgetting what had happened. Why was she there? Why did her face hurt? A ditch, a tree, keep moving. She was bent over, balancing him on her back, his arms over her shoulders. She shuffled forward, holding his wrists, his face against her neck. Her hands burned in the wind. How far is it? She drove it every day. It was at least a mile, 3 long hills, a good mile. Will groaned and kicked his legs. Hold on, she shouted. He coughed against her neck. Something warm rolled down her back. We're almost there. Her teeth hurt, her neck hurt. She pulled down on his wrists to stop him from struggling. Hold on. And so, that's the first paragraph. I'm not going to keep going. But essentially, she gets in a car accident with her youngest son, and she carries him all the way home. I believe this is set in and around the 60s, I think. From my math, I feel like it's either late 50s, early 60s. They don't actually say a time, but they do talk of the war, like World War II and stuff like that, so you can kind of gather where it's set. So clearly there was no way to call or phone for help. There were no cell phones. There was nothing. So she just used instinct, and she carried her son home after he'd flown through, I believe through the windshield of the car is essentially what, they don't actually say, but that's essentially what you get from it. And then, unfortunately, he dies. That's not a spoiler. You know that happens. And after that happens, she turns into a recluse. She literally locks herself in her room for months. And then the story is essentially of her son kind of trying to find his way back to her. But it's not, if you're looking for a happy story, I'm going to say right now, this book is written with a very morbid undertone and a very kind of almost dark undertone. the relationships are not that of like really kind of happy story. I almost would say it's written in a very realistic type of way. Actually, before I go on, I'm just going to warn you that it's also really strange. Like it's written in a very, it just feels strange. There are a couple of moments in here that are like kind of cringy. And like there were things about it that I really didn't like, but when I went on to think about it, it wasn't that they were bad or like bad parts of the book. It was like I didn't like that those things were happening. So it was more to do with I just didn't like certain relationships because of what they were, not because the book was badly written or anything. I actually read this book in a day and a half. Like I started it one day, I finished it the next day, and I couldn't put it down. I think I read the first 160 pages on the first day. So if you're interested, I did find this on Book Outlet. I'm sure it's in other places, but I am going to start kind of going into the spoiler part. Alright guys, I'm going to get into like the rest of the video now where I expose everything I can think of about this book. Okay. I don't usually have this hard of a time rating a book. Like I don't normally feel this like, what should I give it? I ended up giving it 4 stars. I did. Kind of go on just feeling like there are some aspects of this book that I think definitely were like maybe 2-star, and then there were other parts that were kind of more like 5-star, and so I guess you'd normally fall as like a 3-star. I would say maybe like 3.75, but I did round that up to 4 because there were just things about this book that for me, I just felt it deserved it. So essentially in this book, I already kind of told you about it, but it's about a kid, teenager, yeah, a youngish, like mid-teenager or whatever, and his younger brother died, and after his younger brother dies, his mom turns into a recluse. She is like extremely depressed. She literally spends months on end in her bedroom. At one point, she takes his father's gun and drives off and just disappears for like 4 or 5 days in the winter, and the kid knows she's taken the gun, and it's just, there are so many weird situations and weird things. Like the main character, I can't even remember his name. Oh my goodness. Oh, his name is Ash, or he's Irish, I believe, so his name is like Ashley, but he goes by Ash in the book, or at least they call him Ash in the book. Ash and his mom have a really weird relationship where, like, for instance, like it's I guess it's really distant, and he calls her Nell. Nell is her name, but he never calls her mom. He always calls her Nell. He always talks about her by her name, which was something that kind of turned me off. But also when you think of the relationship that they have, it's not close. It's not like a really like loving, attached relationship. And even when you hear about stories like from before her brother had passed away, she still seemed very curt and very closed off and still reclusive, but not to the extreme of when her son dies. Or rather, I should go back in time a little bit. So his dad actually passed away 10 years before, I believe. I think it was like 10 years before the brother died. His dad actually passed away. They never actually say what happened to him, so I'm not sure. But his dad did pass away. And I think that was sort of where it started with her, between like the way that she was acting and her kids. Like she's just really broken, and it just was a very odd relationship to read about. So after Will dies, the brother, her boyfriend Carl ends up moving in to their house, even though like she doesn't let him stay there. She keeps him at like arm's reach there. It's not a very good relationship. It's actually a pretty terrible relationship. She's kind of verbally abusive to him, and he just takes it. But after she goes into this reclusive state, he decides to move into the house and kind of act like a father figure to this kid. But obviously, like, there's no respect from one way or the other, really, and he tries to do this, like, I'm the head of the household thing, and the kid just thinks he shouldn't be there. It's a very weird relationship. And then her estranged sister ends up coming to live with them, and while she's on this, like, I've driven off to possibly kill myself, you don't know what she's doing, the boyfriend and the sister end up sleeping together, and it's like really cringy. And again, it wasn't badly written. It was like, I just didn't like what was happening. I didn't like how they were treating Ash, and I didn't like how the mom treated anyone. I really hated the mom for most of this book. Now, I disliked her, but at the same time, I felt for her so hard, and I just couldn't imagine the heartbreak that she would have gone through to end up in the state that she was in, especially because the sister at one point, like Nell's sister, she talks about how Nell is so much different than she was when she was with her first husband, and when she was with her only husband, when she was with her husband and he was still alive, there was a lot of laughter and happiness, and she was a completely different person than she is now. So that was really heartbreaking. And so after months and months and months, Ash manages to get his mom to come out of her room, and they end up going on this random trip. So they're from Ontario, Canada, and they end up flying to Nevada. And you find out that when she was a teenager, her and Ash's dad had met. They had had like a fling, and she got pregnant, and he had to go off to war. And so she thought he wasn't coming back. Like they weren't really in a relationship. She thought maybe she'd never see him again. And so she actually went to the States, and she gave birth to the baby there, because obviously people used to hide pregnancies, especially when they were used to hide pregnancies when they were illegitimate, when they weren't married and stuff like that. So she ended up going to Nevada for like 6 months, and she ended up having the baby, and the baby ended up dying. And so you find out that this lady has just had like tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. Like she lost her first child, and then she ended up going back and marrying the father of that child, and then she lost that man, and then later on she lost her youngest son. And so she's lost 2 kids and a husband, and it's really sad and it's really heartbroken, and I'm like getting choked up. I didn't cry during the book or anything, but it's so hard to imagine that happening and ending up okay. Like you understand why she is the way she is, and why she has kind of it's sad because the son that's left gets none of her. It's like she has nothing left to give. And so he almost has to play like the parental figure in her life. Like he has to keep her alive and keep her fed and find her and keep her safe, kind of a thing. Like he becomes his mother's keeper, essentially. And so it's kind of relatable in the sense that I had a brother pass away when I was 7. One of my brothers passed away. And my mom, well, she didn't go into this like reclusive state to the point of this book. I know that she was more distant with us, with the rest of us after that happened. And I do know growing up, my mom and I had a really strained relationship. Never to the point of this. It was never this bad. But I do know, like even now I still kind of feel this way, but I felt like I had to shelter my mom from so many things and so many things about me and so much information, so that like she wasn't hurt by things. Like I felt like I had to be really careful growing up around her. And so I kind of felt like I related to this book really hard. And so I ended up giving it a 4, and first I was going to give it like a 3, but as I was writing the review, I kept writing things that were positive about the book that I didn't realize how many positive points I had until I started writing the review, and then I was like, why am I writing this, why does this review sound so good, but I'm not giving it like a higher star rating? So I ended up going with my gut and going with a 4, but I just found this book, and the ending wasn't anything. Like the ending was almost nothing, which I usually hate. Like I usually hate nothing endings, but it was such a real thing. Like he had found out about all of his mother's secrets, and I feel like he sort of had some justification and some like clarification on the subject and why she acted the way that she did. It wasn't like their relationship was magically better. It was like it kind of ended in like just that they were going back to their lives. And like I would like to hope that it got better and stuff like that. but it doesn't end on that like fairy tale note where all of the sudden they've made amends and they've apologized for all these things. It doesn't end like that. It ends kind of abruptly, and it's not on like a super high note, but it almost felt real life, because that's kind of like how, like, real life isn't like this one final moment and then the rest of your life is grand. So I don't know, I really appreciated this book, and I think it's probably underrated, but I feel like this book is like either you're gonna really like it or you're gonna really hate it, and I think if you don't relate and you don't have a similar sort of experience, I feel like maybe you wouldn't like this very much, but it's just, it hit me really hard, and I've been thinking about it the last few days, and so that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And then there's also kind of like a weird side relationship. Ash does have a girlfriend named Sheila, and she has like a bad leg. And there's a couple of like awkward, not sex scenes, but sexual scenes. And some random weird thoughts. But then if you're like, well, maybe as a teenage kid, like I've never been in the body of a teenage boy or the mind of a teenage boy, but the thoughts seem fairly realistic, I guess. Like I feel like those kinds of things might go through like a young person's head, especially when they're like raging hormones and things like that. There are just some weird aspects to this book. Some of them are like kind of really awkward and cringy, just like, I wish I wasn't reading this right now. Like, ugh. But it was written in a kind of, like, to me, a really realistic way. So I did give this book 4 stars. I Think I Carried You Home was a really good read, a really great find, like a really big steal for $2. Like if it wasn't that cheap, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But I do think if you like kind of depressing, morbid books, this is something that you would maybe enjoy. I don't know. But those are my thoughts and my tea. Oh, have you guys been watching this, like, tilting? Are you getting nervous? I just wanted to kind of do this little book talk. I think I'm going to do this every so often, so the beginning is, like, spoiler-free, the ending is, like, spoiler everywhere. Because sometimes things just need to be talked about. Anyway, if you have a booktube channel, if you have recommendations, leave them down below. If you have a favorite booktuber that you think I should check out, or someone you think I might like their books or whatever, their style of reading, leave it down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notifications, because a lot of times things don't end up in inboxes. And I will talk to you guys soon in my next video. Bye!